Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spinner Rack, and today I'm going to do a brief video on a comic book that was done in the 90s by George Perez and relaunched in the 2000s by Perez again. Now, so you have these great books, George Perez, storyteller, games. We're going to deal with Crimson Plague, right? So let's swipe this book out of here for now. Now, I've tried to do this video, and Perez packs so much story into his comic books that I can't go through the entire issue. I can't do it because it's basically it's a storytelling time. It'll be here forever, right? So I'm gonna introduce you to the original cover to Crimson Plague, right? So back in the 90s, George Perez had done post Infinity Gauntlet. He had went on a high doing Saxon Violence. He did Hulk Future Imperfect, Peter David, and then he was kind of roaming around doing stuff in the 90s when comics were selling, but also comics were crashing. So Perez was trying to figure out what would be the next thing he was going to do. And it's going to be creator owned. It's going to be a character called the Gladiator, right? So while he was coming up with it, he met some comic fans, and the comic fans, he said that he was going to start utilizing, like since he used a lot of likenesses, he was going to make this story be sort of the cast of 1,000 fans, like a comic of 1,000 fans. So he would have these models that are here on this page, which is Dina Simmons and Shannon Lower. They were going to be the models for two characters, but then there'd be a whole cast of people in comics that would, in comic fandom, that would be cast in this book. But when Perez would go to the cons, he would run into Dina and Shannon, and they were like, "Hey, tell us about the thing." And as Perez was thinking about mainly Dina's Crimson Plague character, Perez got more interested as he was creating stuff while he was talking to her, and he kept thinking about it. So he kind of pushed his Gladiator, which that was already announced by for Image, that he's going to do Gladiator. So instead, he was going to do Crimson Plague, right? And I think his wife named her Crimson Plague. It was originally just Plague, and she was supposed to be the like Catwoman to Batman, or the Sans Serif to the Spirit. It'd be that sort of character, but slowly she sort of took over, as characters do, took over the title, right? And Gladiator would be a background sort of character, right? So as Perez went on, he also was still getting requests to do. I think ultimately it went from Image to Event Comics. I think Quesada and Palmiotti, they had kind of gave him an offer, and he went over there to do that, and he got out I think 2 issues, which were smaller issues, right? Mind you, they were a lot smaller. So then he had to shelve it. It wasn't a success. It was while the time where comics were crashing. So ultimately, but it was something he wanted to come back to. So he was saying build up his name again. He did the Avengers. He had done the Ultraverse. A bunch of things had happened for him. So he was like, now it's the time for him and a bunch of other creators to create the Guerrilla imprint, which was with Kurt Busiek, I think Mark Waid. I think a bunch of people were involved in it. Carl Kessel, Tom Grummett. And this was Perez's book, but ultimately he only got to do 2 issues, right? So I'd love to sit here and go through the entire book. Basically, this is Perez's foray into hardcore sci-fi. He did a little bit of it in iBots, but that wasn't his book. This is him drawing and writing the book, and it's a hardcore sci-fi type of title. And I'm just going to do this opening sequence because I tried to do this video, and I could show you page after page, but there's so much story it's just pointless to kind of go through it without you just going out, getting these 2 issues, and just seeing what could have been and how far Perez might have taken this. It starts out with this silent sequence with, what we've seen in comics where the girl gets accosted and then, of course, she kicks everybody's behind, right? But it's Perez style. So you get all this cool stuff happening, and then she gets stabbed, and then that makes things worse. And they shoot at her, and her blood is a contagion, making people dissolve. And gets to the end, to the last person, and he says, "I bleed, you die." End of story. And that's what happens. There's a lot of cool effects, colors by Tom Smith, longtime Perez collaborator. And basically right here, you get into heavy sci-fi stuff here. Basically, like people off-world, like sort of having that Aliens type feel, but Alien didn't create this, because this is something you could get when you read sort of sci-fi novels. So this is drawing from that same sort of subject matter. But to quickly sort of show you, we have the Shannon character also here, in this other area that's going on. But you also have sort of the 90s sort of thing that they pull from American Flag and Dark Knight, where you have these sort of short news things, like sort of newscasters telling the story and filling in the gaps, right? And so they introduce you to these taggers that are introduced with these intercut with Plague taking out more people. But as you get to here, you get to see who the rest of the cast was going to be, and who these I think they're gladiators, but originally I think they were called taggers. There's a tagger called Order, and this is a cool looking character. And here's Gladiator. This was the character that Perez was going to lead with, and I think there's a couple of ads for him, or at least something mock-ups that Perez did. But then you get to see the whole array of taggers that these gladiators somehow defunct. So I'm not doing it. I tried. There's no way for me to give you the story of Crimson Plague without just you're not getting all the bits. You have to go back and read this. But I just want to say these are out there. They're probably easy to find. I have the 2 issues. Somewhere I have the original one, but we're just going to look through this book to see some of the other images of Crimson Plague, which it says living the dream. So post Avengers, using that fame, he would go do Crimson Plague again, basically republishing what he'd already done with a little more pages, and he still had to shelve it, which is sad, right? But we get all these cool things, a nice cool outfit, and has he done gore? But it's, for Perez, it's still in the classic comic book type of gore, so nothing too crazy like grips or anything like that. And still, you see the 2 leads, and all these faces would be like Perez's love letter to the fans, right? And then it goes to cross-chain. So, any bits, this story more has the people that you meet on these space factories running into Plague. And this is a regular sized issue. So, if you want more, I can go through it. But, it's really a tough one to do like a video where you go through it, because Perez does a lot of panels. So as you go through it, you're like, oh, this is cool stuff. This is something that you need to take your shoes and socks off and read to really get into. But it's only 2 issues. I know people aren't big on, hey, this thing was canceled, I don't need to read it. But if you're a Perez fan, you have to be a completist. You gotta get it. All right? So check it out when you get a chance. And that's about it. Sorry I didn't go through the whole thing. I just don't feel it does it justice. And I've done one that was a 2-hour video, and I've done another one. And with the amount of panels, it's just kind of hard to do a sort of video where we go through it. But it's definitely a book you should check out. Spin Rack out.